Welcome to the Podium Pod, the Pick and Rolls National Basketball Podcast, as we begin the road to Paris 2024. I'm Adam Webster. I'm joined today by Pick and Roll feature writer Ben Mallis. And Ben, we're here to talk about the first game between the Boomers and China, a victory for the Boomers, 107-87.
Yeah, Adam, it feels like we're back, isn't it? And as has become a tradition with all these Boomers campaigns, the first game, look, there's not really much point looking at the box score, is there? I'm sure we'll go through a few things, but there were definitely some cobwebs getting blown out, and the China team put up a fight. Unfortunately, I don't think they'd be beating many NBL teams, let alone the Boomers, but we're back. We're 3 weeks out from Paris, and it feels like we're really on this now. And yeah, it's Olympic month, which is exciting.
It's very exciting. We've got another game against Paris in a couple of days' time. But as for this game, it started out really sputtery. Josh Giddey had a turnover in the opening seconds. There was some poor defense on display. But the turnover from Giddey kind of set the tone in the first quarter in a negative fashion. And the Boomers really struggled to get going. And you're right, the cobwebs were right there.
100%. And obviously there was some turnovers, some sloppy offense, which isn't great. Defensively, though, the Boomers were sleepwalking through that first quarter. I think it was 32 points, right, that China scored in that quarter. And again, it's the first quarter of the first game, and we're not going to read too much into it. But with these games, it's all about, for mine, finding the macro issues that leak out and projecting forward a little bit. And we'll get into it. But defensively, seeing Joe and Petey get blown past was one thing. Giddey made some bad rotations and fouled a three-point shooter when it was up in the air. We saw the size of the Chinese big men inside really dominating in the first few minutes. So for mine, it's less about the actual score and how lethargic the team was to start, because that will get better. But it does offer some glimpses, I think, as to what the weaknesses were of this team going back 12 months with that very poor World Cup campaign, and the clear improvement areas that need to get sorted if this team has any hopes of winning games once they get to Paris.
And if we've learned anything by FIBA play, then it's about chemistry and building chemistry really quickly as well. And obviously, a lot of these players have played together before. We'll talk about some guys that haven't played and played well, did themselves no disservice tonight with their performance. But early in the game, it was really Duop Reith that got the team going. He ended up being the second highest scorer on the team with 21. As you said, not too concerned with stats, but we'll cite them anyway. The guy that got hot was my man, whose jersey's just behind me, Jack McVey. He was 24 points on the night and really set the tone offensively. He was hitting everything. 13 minutes he played. He was 6 of 8 from three-point range. There was an article that came out on espn.com.au during the week about how Jack was preparing for the Olympics and staking his claim and doing everything he could to be picked for this Paris team. And it certainly looked like that heading into this first game. He was lights out. Now, shooters get hot, so you can't really take too much from it other than he got hot. But at the same time, this is a guy who just won the NBL Finals MVP. He was able to score, back to the basket, score, from outside the arc and hit those 6 threes. But the confidence he played with and the different look that he gave the Boomers is something we didn't have in Japan.
100%. I'm pretty sure in that article from Olgan that he referenced being, meant to be in Bali right now for his honeymoon. So he definitely played like someone that's been chilling out on the Canggu beach for a couple of weeks and just stormed into action today. And again, what we saw him do, which was jacking up shots, converting very well from the outside and really turbocharging that offense. That's great in this game. But again, for mine, the thing that stood out was his type of play and the archetype of a player he is. That rangy, again, 6'4", 6'5", up wing that can go between the 3 and the 4, that can shoot the ball and come off. There was a play where he came off a pin down in the second quarter, and again, nailed a 3 from the top of the key. That's the same play this team has run for Patty Mills for the past decade, but they're doing it with a guy that's, again, closer to 200 centimeters and has the range and is one of the best shooters in Australia. Now, him doing this in the first warm-up game probably isn't the best thing for the Boomers, because there's no way known that he's going to be getting that much space once we get to Paris, if he makes it that far, because opponents are going to obviously watch this and say, we need to get a hand on that guy. But really, it just elevates Jack McVey into a spot where he is not just on the bubble of making the Olympic roster, but for mine, it comes down to him versus someone like Chris Goulding, who, again, Goulding didn't play at the World Cup. And if Goorjian isn't going to play Goulding, then they have to be looking seriously at Jack McVey Because as I said, not only can he shoot the ball, but he's got some size, he's got some athleticism that this team lacks. And while it was only going up against this China team, seeing him do that gave a glimpse as to what he can do at the higher levels. And again, once we get past this Olympic campaign, I think you might be getting a bit nervous, Adam. His days in Tasmania might be coming to an end if this keeps up.
It's not the first person to say that to me tonight, Ben, that he might be going to Europe or to America for a lot more money than the NBL can offer at this point in time. And, I think no Tasmania Jack Jumpers supporter would begrudge him that opportunity, but certainly did himself very well there. Someone that does us well on the Podium Pod, we're brought to you by Team Feet. Team Feet offers premium athletic socks for modern teams, however they compete. With sweat-wicking cotton, arch support, ventilation panels, and compression stitching, Team Feet socks are built to outperform. Whether your team is tiny or 1,000 strong, Team Feet unites and excites your players and supporters with their combination of quality and performance. Join basketball teams around Australia and the world by choosing Team Feet. For designs and worldwide delivery, head to teamfeet.com. Ben, I want to talk about some other boomers. We spoke briefly about Paddy Mills. He was the only boomer not to score tonight, and the pressure kind of builds a little bit for Paddy heading into this second game and the games overseas, the other two warm-up games that the boomers face, because he struggled in Japan. He obviously had a great tournament in Tokyo, but that was 3 years ago. He's in a different stage of his career now, and he has to really justify not his place in the side, because I think it's assured that he goes, but his minutes.
100%. Look, Paddy is going to obviously be in the Olympic team. There's not any debate there. And he's going to be getting minutes and he's going to be on the plane. And yeah, he didn't shoot the ball well today. But I think for mine, the fact that it's the first game, like I said, he was on the bench coaching in the second half after flying in from, I think it was Hawaii over the weekend. So the performance today isn't a concern, but you're bang on when you reference what we saw 12 months ago at the World Cup, where Paddy looked small because his step was slowing down and he's getting a bit older. And if he can't get space to elevate and get that shot off, then he goes from being our most lethal scorer to a sixth-man type in an ideal role. And that in a fully fledged Boomers team is where I would like him to be. Now, whether there's enough outward scoring on the team to allow that, I think that's the crux of the discussion we'll be having over the next month, because if we need Paddy Mills to shoot 15 times a game and score 20 points to beat the likes of Greece or Spain or Slovenia or Canada, who are the teams we're going to have to beat, then this team isn't getting out of the group. Whereas if Giddy and everyone else can step up and carry Paddy Mills a little bit, then I think as a secondary player offensively, he can really shine. So tonight, I'm sure next game out on Thursday, he'll look for his shot. He'll be more aggressive. And if that first one goes in, he'll get the confidence. But again, it's come up a few times in our little stream so far that this was only China. So the shots going in or not isn't going to make or break Paddy's campaign. It's more as to whether he can find a role that fits him at this stage of his career.
Now, 3 Boomers were missing from this game. Jock Landale, Dante Exum, and Josh Green, who was just traded today to the Charlotte Hornets. All missed this one. Do you expect them to suit up in the second game? And if so, what are you expecting to see from those guys, particularly Jock Landale, who missed the World Cup through injury?
Well, shout out to Josh Green, who unfortunately got sent to Siberia going to Charlotte yesterday. So I think he can be forgiven for taking a night off to mourn the fact that he's going from the NBA Finals to the top of the lottery. But in all seriousness, those 3 players will get good minutes, I would have thought, on Thursday. And we should see them ramp up as the next fortnight goes along, because Green and Exum will definitely be on the plane to Paris. And Landale, you referenced that, is the key, because we saw at the World Cup, the team looked small. They weren't able to really replace his skill set and his size. And again, that shone through in moments this evening that the Chinese big men obviously have more size than any Boomers, but they were able to get some easy buckets that we know Landale would at least deter and make life a little bit harder. So it'd be nice to see them out there, all 3 of them, on Thursday night. But again, the biggest step up is going to be next week when they get to the Middle East and they're playing the likes of Team USA and the really elite teams. That it's all well and good now using Thursday and the next week to really round into form. But it's really going to happen quick in terms of the standard elevating. And Landale, of those 3 names, is obviously the most important player for the Boomers, because we saw that we can't replace him.
So 14 players played tonight. How many players do you expect Brian Goorjian to take to the Middle East as we line up against the USA and Serbia. Do you think that it will cut it down from, say, 17 to 15 or 14? I think the squad for Paris is 12, right? So 5 have to go at some point. Do we do sort of 3 now and 2 later?
I would expect them to be quite aggressive with making the cuts over the weekend. They did this historically last year, and again with the Tokyo Olympics 3 years ago, they were quite quick in terms of nullifying down who's actually going, maybe taking a reserve, maybe 2 with them when they get on the road. So I'd expect to be 14 players max that hop on the plane to get over to the Middle East. Because, again, the players that aren't going to make it, the DJ Vasilevics of the world, Jack McVey, if he doesn't go, then there's still time for these guys to get the Summer League if they wanted to do that. So I think they'll be pretty quick with making the cuts. And really, there are a few names that stick out on that list that we know aren't going to be making it. And the debates we're going to have, think Nick Kay, who looks like he might be on the bubble as a big man now. Philosophically, I would have thought that Gorge knows what he wants to do. Does he want to take the extra big man or does he not? And while he might test that over the next couple of days, historically, he's been pretty stubborn in the sense that he knows what he wants to do and he makes decisions quickly. And I suspect that will happen again once we get through Thursday's game.
Last thing we'll discuss is Xavier Cooks played a lot of power forward in this contest. He was our center in Japan for much of it due to the fact that Jock Landale missed out. Do you expect there to be 2 big lineups a lot more in this tournament, given the big man deficiencies that we saw in Japan?
I definitely think Cooks has a chance to start at the 4 because, again, even flashing back the last 5 years, we've seen Nick Kay has been the incumbent at power forward dating back to the China World Cup 5 years ago. So this team has liked to play with size. It really is that old basketball cliche for mine that it's less about who's starting the games and what does that crunch time unit look like. Again, if it's hypothetically tied against Luka Doncic or against Spain or against Canada, who are the 5 players that Gordon feels comfortable going out there? Now, Giddey picks himself. Historically, Mills picks himself. I dare say Landau will be out there as well. But those final 2 spots, it really is Russian roulette because you've got defensive players like Josh Green, like Matisse Thybulle, that if they're making 3 balls look elite, they're world beaters. But if the shot isn't falling, then going big with someone like Xavier Cooks is a realistic option because he can get out there, he can defend, he does have great size. We've seen it in the NBA. He doesn't quite have that level of skill set, but relative to everything else on this Boomers roster, he is probably their best athletic bet of it against going up against these big 6-foot wings that they're going to have to play. So I think Cooks will definitely get minutes once we get over there, and he's going to have the opportunity to prove that he belongs in those crunch moments, which again is all he can ask for because he's got his chance now to prove that he can really make an impact at the Olympic level.
Ben Mallis, thanks for joining us on the Podium Pod.
Thanks, Adam. Anytime.
We'll be back tomorrow night after the first Opals game against China. Until then, we'll see you again next time.